You're a young mother in 1453. Constantinople, the city's formidable walls, which have held back invaders for over a millennium, groan under the relentless assault of Ottoman cannons. Your husband fell 3 days ago defending the ramparts, leaving you clutching your infant daughter in a room where fear hangs thicker than smoke. Outside, Turkish soldiers are breaking down doors, and the fate awaiting you promises that his death, terrible as it was, may have spared you from something far worse. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire stretched across continents, from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Yemen. We remember them for architectural brilliance, military genius, and sultans who altered the course of history. But another story exists, one often buried in archives: the calculated machinery of human conquest, where bodies became property and suffering became protocol. Take a breath before we continue. Wherever you are, peering through a foggy window in Istanbul, leaning over a cafe table in Cairo, or huddled in a quiet room in Boston, pause for a moment and marvel. Across oceans, across centuries, these events still reach us, carried in memory, in record, in curiosity. If this intrigues you, hit like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. Each voice helps us keep these histories alive. When Ottoman troops breached the final gates, Constantinople did not explode in chaos. There were no triumphant shouts, no clashing of swords resonating through the streets. Instead, the city fell into a peculiar stillness, a hush that seemed to seep into every corner, every shuttered window. Soldiers marched with quiet precision, banners snapping in the wind, crimson and gold against a twilight sky. Victory was not heralded by noise but imposed through order, a discipline that transformed terror into ritual. The conquest unfolded not through random violence but through exacting structure. From the towers, janissaries watched alleys and courtyards like hawks, reading movement, assessing value, anticipating opportunity. The city's residents, caught in the careful calculations of the invaders, became participants in an unspoken ledger. Here, the first phase of what contemporaries would call the harvest began. A methodical taking, not of wealth or territory, but of people. An elderly merchant, shoulders hunched beneath the remnants of his fine robes, watched from a balcony above a debris-strewn courtyard. His fingers gripped the splintered railing, knuckles white. "It is not the fire nor the cannon that conquers," he murmured to the empty street, voice trembling, "but the measured exhalation of those left behind." Below, lines of women moved with uncertain steps, their expressions masked, their bodies evaluated with the cold neutrality of commerce. The scene resembled ceremony more than cruelty. Chroniclers of the time describe soldiers cataloging women with meticulous care, noting age, appearance, health, and skill. Each assessment reduced a person to a set of attributes, a commodity in the empire's ledger. Touches, glances, and measured gestures became instruments of calculation. The city itself seemed to respond, the river whispering along empty quays, horses' hooves hesitant on cobblestones, the wind carrying a child's muffled sob across rooftops as if the stones mourned in unison. Victory was measured in control, not chaos. Ottoman scribes recorded with precision: women received, names noted, measures taken, empire secured, accounts balanced. Diaries paint a darker picture: the unrelenting weight of inevitability, the betrayal of familiar streets, the recognition in a stranger's eyes that one's life had been reduced to calculation. Even in its bureaucratic precision, the harvest was performative. Generals paused to inspect captives, observing posture, composure, and the way a gaze held, or failed to hold, defiance. Soldiers' judgments determined futures. Who would serve in distant palaces? Who would labor? Who would be sent to markets far from home? Each act, seemingly mundane, was loaded with meaning. In this ritual, ordinary streets became stages, and every step, every look, became emblematic of conquest. As night fell, lanterns swayed in the chill wind, casting fractured shadows across ruined courtyards. The city's gates, once symbols of freedom, now enclosed the echoes of a conquered population. Whispers traveled through the corridors. The harvest had only begun. Those who survived the initial sweep sensed the methodical appetite of the empire, a power that demanded precision as much as submission. Beyond the gates, a single bell tolled, not in celebration, but as a signal. Its tremulous note stretched across empty streets and shattered courtyards. Residents turned instinctively toward the sound, recognizing its meaning without understanding its specifics. The machinery of conquest was in motion, and the city, suspended in quiet dread, held its breath once more. Across Constantinople, the process extended into every domain. Adult males were executed not in battle, but in organized sequences after surrender. Boys as young as 6 could be removed from their families, destined for military or administrative service under the Devshirme system. Women and girls faced categorization according to age and perceived utility. The youngest and most able-bodied earmarked for labor or assimilation into the imperial household, older women often executed. Families were forced to witness, ensuring that terror and compliance became communal lessons. Documentation accompanied every step. Women were recorded not by name but by age, physical description, and perceived worth. Ship manifests listed human cargo alongside silk, spices, and precious metals. Survival depended not on courage or status, but on calculation, which vessels transported laborers, which carried valuable girls destined for markets, which housed the injured to preserve potential reproductive capacity. Even death was itemized, recorded alongside ruined commodities. The empire's administrative rigor extended to the psychological as well as the physical. Mothers were separated from infants, sometimes permanently, to induce compliance and erase hope of return. Girls were trained in conversion programs and prepared for future service within the imperial hierarchy. Records indicate deliberate manipulation to ensure the mental and emotional collapse of captives, fostering obedience through calculated trauma. Survivors' journeys carried horrors beyond the city's walls. Ships became floating prisons with designated cells, water stores, and minimal provisions designed to preserve life only to the extent that it maintained economic or strategic value. Women lost names, possessions, and identities, replaced with numbers and new designations, stripped of culture, language, and memory. Centers established across the empire standardized this process, optimizing captivity and control. The Ottoman approach was systematic, deliberate, and bureaucratic. It transformed conquest into administration, trauma into procedure, human lives into ledgers. Yet it was more than efficiency. It was terror writ across an entire population, a silent calculus that reshaped cities, families, and generations. Even in the centuries that followed, the echoes of these practices persisted in the culture, memory, and myths of conquered peoples. The fall of Constantinople, as horrific as it was in destruction, became more chilling in the quiet, ordered precision with which human lives were harvested, recorded, and dispersed. The streets are silent now, but the silence carries the hum of calculation. You feel it in the cracks of the cobblestones, in the steady drip of water from a cracked fountain, in the way the air tastes faintly of dust and metal. Somewhere beyond the city's walls, the empire organizes its treasures, and you realize the most valuable of all are the bodies it measures and moves with the precision of ink on parchment. From domes that gleam in sunlight to shadowed courtyards, the machinery of captivity churns with quiet inevitability. If you have ever wondered how grief can be catalogued, counted, and priced, look no further than the imperial ledgers and the caravans that move beneath the empire's eyes. Wherever you are, watching from a crowded square in Cairo, a quiet flat in London, or a dusty street in Istanbul, pause for a moment and think. The same history you witness here was once lived by countless, nameless women. If this fascinates or chills you, like, subscribe, and comment where you're joining from. Let's trace this global thread together, from city to city, soul to soul. Within the administrative heart of the empire, women disappeared as efficiently as coins passing through a mint. Merchant caravans rolled out at dawn, their oxen lowing and wheels creaking against the stone roads. But hidden beneath bolts of cloth and crates of spices were captives, measured and weighed as carefully as cargo. Each body, each voice accounted for. The accountant's quills scratched across ledgers, tracking age, fertility, skill, and resilience. Inside the conversion houses, which masqueraded as schools, Tutors waited with ink-stained hands and ledger books. Young women entered as daughters of conquered cities and left with new names, new religions, new numerical identities. Whispered prayers were replaced with memorized prayers written on parchment, and each mistake was recorded, annotated, and filed. One tutor, a man named Kamal, noted in his journal, "Each child is a sum, each sigh a transaction. None escape the count." Medical ledgers followed as closely as the quills, tracking wombs with the precision reserved for livestock registries. Midwives, trained in both healing and inspection, recorded menstrual cycles, pregnancies, and miscarriages in columns with headings as impersonal as coin values. The women, lying on cold slabs of marble, felt the empire's gaze press against their bodies, each observation etched into bureaucratic memory. Rhetorical questions haunt every corridor. How can human lives be quantified without losing the weight of humanity? How does an empire reconcile the sound of a scream with the glint of silver in a coffer? In the governor's hall, men in robes with tassels of gold and crimson pondered these queries as if they were sums to be solved, not moral dilemmas. Their deliberations were silent, their pens merciless. Even the streets outside reflected the order within. Caravans moved in regimented lines, disguised as markets, yet every stop, every pause, served an unseen ledger. A woman sold bread in the market square, a girl swept the steps of a mosque. Behind their faces, numbers waited. From the public fountains, water splashed in rhythmic intervals, echoing the cadence of accounting and procession. Horses' hooves beat like metronomes over cobblestone, marking time for a choreography of control that had no audience but the empire itself. Dialogue was rare, but when it came, it carried the weight of both fear and instruction. In a courtyard where captives were gathered for inspection, a young scribe asked a soldier, "Are they ours now, fully?" The soldier, eyes cold beneath the turban, replied, "They have never belonged to anyone else. Ownership is a ledger, and we have signed their lines." Even as the words fell, the women remained statues of quiet understanding, their futures dictated by numbers and signatures, their cries abstracted into ink. The empire's reach extended into every home, every hidden alley, every dark corner of the city. No shadow escaped the gaze of those who processed human lives as efficiently as grain or textiles. Even the night seemed calculated. Lanterns swung at precise intervals to illuminate courtyards for inspection. Guards moved in disciplined arcs. Distant bells tolled at measured moments, not for devotion, but to regulate work and rest. By dusk, the machinery had run its first cycle. Names were rewritten, identities reassigned, routes mapped, and numbers confirmed. The women, already weary from hours of counting and measuring, realized that the empire's dominion was not only external, it penetrated the mind, the body, and the memory. And yet, in the corridors and caravans, some voices whispered in fragments, refusing total erasure. And in that moment, the machinery paused, only to begin again. The ledgers were full, the ink drying in dim candlelight. But the empire had not ended its work. Somewhere in the distance, a caravan rattled over stone as if to announce that every line written in the ledgers would soon be made real in motion, in travel, in submission. The night held a lingering tension, a prelude to the next calculation, and a solitary figure, a young woman whose name had already been struck from memory, dared to breathe a question into the dark. How far could numbers stretch before humanity snapped? The walls are alive with whispers, yet no one speaks. You feel it in the cool draft that slips between stone and shadow, in the faint metallic tang of water running through aqueducts, in the way the candlelight trembles over empty cradles. Somewhere in the empire's depths, memory itself is being measured, folded, and rewritten, and you realize the conquest has passed from flesh into the mind. From palace balconies in Istanbul to shadowed corridors in distant provincial fortresses, the empire's children learn their first lessons not from mothers, but from registers, tutors, and drill masters. Wherever you are, watching from the streets of Vienna, the plains of Anatolia, or a quiet room in Alexandria, consider this. The legacy of conquest is not only seen in banners or blood, but in the silence where names should be. If this chills or fascinates you, like, subscribe, and share where you're witnessing this story unfold. Let's chart how memory and history intertwine across the world, one city at a time. Inside the chambers of the imperial harem, girls awake to chants and prayers that belong to another world. Their mothers, once voices of lullaby, are reduced to absent figures, their names unspoken, their faces only remembered in fleeting shadows. Tutors move among the children with measured hands, instructing them in languages and customs that erase prior identity. Each word learned is a thread severed from the past, each lesson a brick in the empire's architecture of forgetfulness. Boys, meanwhile, train under the watchful eyes of janissaries. From sunrise to sunset, they march, drill, and recite oaths to banners they will one day carry into battle, banners that conquered the lands of their fathers. Muscles grow strong, obedience sharp, yet laughter is scarce. Where once they might have heard stories of kin and village, now they hear only the cadence of commands. A young boy, pausing mid-drill, whispers to a comrade, "Do we remember the rivers of home?" The comrade shakes his head. The word home is already fraying at the edges of memory. Rhetorical questions echo in the corridors. What is the value of a name if no one remembers it? How much of a soul can be rewritten before the original ceases to exist? In the deepest vaults, the empire charts these erasures with meticulous care. Birth registers replace birthright, genealogies are rewritten, mothers' faces become ghostly annotations in the margins of official records. The sensory world of these children is one of discipline and ritual. Lanterns swing at precise intervals, casting shadows that stretch and retract like living things. Marble floors chill bare feet, and the scent of incense masks the faint odors of fear and fever. Tutors' quills scratch ceaselessly in dim light, while overseers pace with the soft tap of leather-soled shoes. Even the wind outside carries no comfort. It slips silently between towers and courtyards, a ghostly witness to lives being reshaped. Dialogue, rare but piercing, carries immense weight. In a small chamber, a girl, newly named Fatma, whispers to a friend, "I dream of my mother, yet I cannot call her by her name." The friend tilts her head, eyes wide. Names vanish here like smoke. Perhaps it is safer to forget. And so they forget, learning obedience in place of memory, submission in place of story. Girls destined for palace service are instructed in grace, poise, and etiquette, every gesture measured to reinforce loyalty to the empire. Boys are drilled into soldiers, instruments of conquest against the lands from which their blood springs. Every footstep, every hand movement, every syllable repeated in drills and lessons is a deliberate act of erasure. The empire does not merely conquer land, it conquers lineage, identity, the continuity of voice. By twilight, the children line the courtyards in quiet procession, their small faces illuminated by the final rays of sun. Lanterns cast gold upon their eyes, yet those eyes no longer search for the familiar. Some press small hands to the walls, seeking echoes of mothers long absent. Others clasp fists over hearts, attempting to anchor themselves against the tide of memory lost. Their silence is more eloquent than any cry, more damning than any ledger entry. Even the air seems complicit, carrying the faint metallic taste of discipline and fear. Somewhere the empire's archivists tally names erased, assigning value to absence. And yet, in this rigid world, small acts of defiance flicker. A whispered song in an unknown tongue, a folded paper tucked beneath a pillow, a glance that refuses full submission. The empire records, calculates, and organizes, but it cannot entirely extinguish what clings stubbornly to breath and bone. As night falls, a hush descends over the corridors and courtyards. The children sleep under banners of conquest, their dreams carefully policed, their memories already half forgotten. Somewhere, a girl stirs, murmuring a syllable of a name she cannot fully remember. Somewhere, a boy presses a hand to the earth, imagining a river he has never seen. The empire sleeps alongside them, vigilant, calculating, aware that the final conquest is never complete. And in that fragile silence the question lingers: what survives when the names themselves are gone?